I read the article you sent me, Sujatha.
I thought it was pertinent to the conversation we had.
Very informative. There's so much I don't know. I've led a sheltered life.
Oh, we all have.
Yeah, been very fortunate. And so I really should do some more learning and reading. You can learn a lot just by reading these articles, these true stories, and even seeing what's going on today. Oh my gosh, this is,
Unreal.
So, yeah, it's terrible.
Welcome, everyone. In this alternative world, virtual world, while we all physically distance and find our way to new ways of connecting. And so I'm very pleased to welcome you to the National Women's Hall of Fame inaugural book club event, Zoom style, from my home office to your home. We're not at the hall, but certainly this expands us. And I'm delighted to be able to be with you tonight, both those friends who have been with the hall for a number of years and some new friends who've signed on for the book club. So welcome, it's lovely. One of the things I want to do before I introduce our honored guest, 2017 Hall inductee, Victoria Jackson, an author, is just attend to a few matters with how we are going to be using Zoom. For your information, we will be recording the book club. So if your preference is not to suddenly appear on a video recording, please turn off your video. That is your choice. And secondly, I'm going to ask you that at first, Victoria and I are just going to be talking about her fabulous book and her amazing radical work. And then I'm going to note when we move to questions from our audience. And I'm going to invite you to click on the button that says participants and to then click on the symbol that's a raised hand so I can and we can make sure that we try and get to you for your question. All right. Life, an experiment, but here we are, and it's an exciting moment. So let me turn now to introduce our guest, and I'm honored to introduce Hall inductee Victoria Jackson. I think it's a perfect book to kick us off in these times of dealing with COVID-19 and trying to find our way through and make sense of our new worlds. She's been described as an activist who moved from mascara to medicine, a mom on a mission. I happen to like her self-description of finding her inner woman warrior. She was, as I said, inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017, and then she was recognized the following year with the Pontifical Key Advocacy Award at Unite to Cure. She's also a firewalker. Yes, one who actually walked on fire with her daughter at a Tony Robbins event. And I kind of like that image because it makes me think about how Victoria greets the heat of the moment like walking on fire and uses that passion to actually explore and to look at what it is that she's going to problem solve or do. And that happened when her daughter, Allie, was diagnosed with neuromyelitis optica. And she looked directly at it as an inner woman warrior would and as a firewalker would, to kind of use the heat of the moment to direct herself to her family, to problem solving, and to turning, as she does, the impossible or seemingly impossible into what's actually possible. For me, Victoria deeply reminds me about The Power of Rare, which is the title of her book. She is that rare activist, that rare author, that entrepreneur, that networker who gives voice where there was a whisper, like with NMO, and lets it roar. And once it roars, we start to rethink how we engage with our medical health system. So please join me, you can do this, in welcoming Victoria Jackson, our honored guest, Hall inductee, to our book gathering tonight. Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Let me start off with a question, and you've referred to this both in the work that you did inside of women's prisons and also definitely in NMO, that you kind of call up this whole revolution from within. And so I thought it would be a wonderful way for you to sort of talk to us about your own life by talking to us about this revolution from within, Victoria Jackson.
Well, first I want to say thank you so much. It's such an honor to be with all of you and to be the first book selected and being part of the hall. It's such an honor to me, and I thank you. And certainly at this time, it's such an extraordinary time. And I think about how I was, even in this book, when I was writing at the time about you know, science meets the soul. I'm thinking about now how our humanity is meeting our soul, and really just the journey that this has been for me. And I was actually looking back when I was, you know, sometimes, you know, we do something and then we're sort of thinking about the next thing we want to conquer, or, you know, our next challenge. And I was looking back at the book and I was reading, and I think if I could, this sort of says it all for me, and answers a little bit of what you were just asking me. But growing up, I remember secretly thinking of myself as somebody who was too different, who didn't really quite fit in, an outsider. But over the years, I've come to embrace and feel empowered by my rare identity. And I've also always been attracted to those who dare to be rare, who think differently, who don't follow form or fashion, but who celebrate the very qualities that set them apart. And I just think how timely that is now, and how, even as I say, and what could sound, people go, what does that mean? You went from mascara to, you know, medicine. That going into something that I thought would be so impossible to, as you said, really look at NMO straight on and think, how am I going to find a cure for this? How am I going to get people to care? Where do I even begin? Where do I even start a conversation when there wasn't even anybody really talking? And I think that's so much of the moment we're in right now. And I really think it's not just a moment. I don't even want to use moment, because I think there's a real shift happening. And I've always been a person to be part of a shift, to encourage a shift. And I'm so grateful and hopeful that this book, even in the world of COVID, really can be helpful as a blueprint for how we can get to where we want to be.
Well, we're going to come back to that, all right, and that whole blueprint and thinking about today. But I have to ask this at the outset. I've read through the book several times. I've met you at induction and so on. And then I start thinking, what does your day look like? When Victoria Jackson gets up in the morning, and I'd like to know the hour,
Right.
can you just walk us through a day through what is that practice that you engage? You know, because I have you like, oh, she's writing a chapter. Oh, she's with the Megacorps. She's,
Yeah, no, it's very, you know, well, first I'll tell you, when I was going through, which I see next to you, thank you very much, you have Saving Each Other, the book that's really our story, before I could even have my blueprint, I didn't sleep. So I had severe insomnia for a good 10 years. And I literally couldn't sleep. So that's where I was always doing my walking down the hall to see if my daughter was potentially having an attack, and didn't want to let me know, because she'd be like, Mom, go to sleep, everything's fine. So I sort of kept myself in this place of sleep deprivation. So I'm not much of a sleeper, and I do seem to be somebody that in the middle of the night is thinking about things. But just for example, I mean, it's this week, yesterday I was on the phone with Genentech, the pharmaceutical company, and they are now getting ready to launch a new novel therapeutic that will be coming out, that I have been hoping to inspire and motivate, and getting people together in the creation of this new therapeutic. And that will be for hundreds of thousands of people. It will go beyond the world of NMO. It'll go into potentially other autoimmune diseases. So I'm always switching gears. So yesterday I was talking to 500 field executives that will be out in the field talking about this new drug. And, you know, that was extraordinary to be able to see what has now been 12 years later, an actual drug coming out. So, and then I might be switching back and forth. I'm in a very unusual time right now. I'm very fortunate, if some of you read the wonderful quote that Ellen gave me, I'm creating a skincare line for Ellen DeGeneres. So it's a little bit 12 years later, back to my roots of creating a skincare line that I also think had to be very reflective and timely to the moment that we're in. And it's called All Kind, which is all about inclusion and diversity for all women, all people, all skin types. So that theme, whether I'm in the world of mascara or medicine or work that I will do out in the world, always has to be about that shift, making that difference, and being inclusive and having people think about things in a different way. But I do find that part of my success has always been that I'm very always, yeah, as women, right? And I'm sure there's some gentlemen on the call too. We all just switch gears all the time. And I have 3 children, and now I'm a grandmother. And it's just, that's just how my brain works. So it's very busy days, but I'm so inspired right now. And I think this next chapter for me is going to be really getting involved in this dialogue that we're all having right now. I mean, come on, you can't be in the National Women's Hall of Fame and not continue the work that's in our DNA.
Well, when you mention that and that's in our DNA, there's a quote, and I think there was a slide with that quote on it, and I wanted to come back to that because it's a quote that I just really love, and I'm going to find it here. And it's, you write, to bring a radical vision to life, it's not enough to think outside the box. Quote, the challenge is to think as if there were no box at all. And this would be a great line about our inductees, because I think that's in their DNA. Thinking as if there's no box at all. But I'm really curious as to when you became sort of more self-conscious about that thinking as if there's no box at all.
I know, because I was just, looking, Gloria had written in my book, it was a beautiful quote. If God is in, Gloria Steinem, who I love and adore, and we all know, if God is in the details, then the goddess is in the connections. I think early on, I just knew that I was just going to walk a different path. And especially going into the world of, as they say, going from making, lip gloss to how am I finding a cure for this? I just knew that I was going to, that I'm not, and especially when it's like life and death, it's your child, you're not afraid to come at it from so many different places. I knew that I was going to have to talk to people from all disciplines. And that was going to be a big part of really building this network, this foundation together, that was going to have to be, that it was going to be having a dialogue with people that weren't in the space of NMO, didn't know about it, but were problem solvers and how they would approach it. So I was very fortunate to be able to start with a core group of advisors where I knew that basically I was going to have to reach everybody's brain trust through their humanity, through making it personal, not owning anybody's intellectual properties, no profit. It was really, help me, I'm trying to find a cure for my daughter, but not only my daughter, who at one point said to me very clearly, this isn't about us, just us anymore. And I knew that it was a bigger calling. And in the beginning, I didn't even know what another face of anybody with NMO looked like. So to start to build that community and put faces and names to people, I just knew that my calling and the way I was going to have to go about that was going to be different, because when's the last time we've even had a cure for a disease? And why aren't people talking together? And so I was so excited when I was on that phone yesterday with Genentech, because I've now seen pharmaceutical companies working together. This is just one of 3 different therapeutics that are coming out, and they have had to collaborate. So if I can even change that conversation a little bit of how we perceive big pharma and our patients and the advocates, and start building bridges and getting people to work together, I have to tell you, it's been an extraordinary awakening and reassuring just see that when people collaborate and communicate, you can actually make a huge difference. And that's part of what I want to inspire, help, carry on now in other diseases. And honestly, when I started, I didn't even think that was going to touch all these other autoimmune diseases. I just put my head down. I love my child, and I just wasn't going to let anything get in the way.
Yeah, it's so moving and so brilliant. I mean, I paused on so many parts in the book because there are moments in the book where you're reading the story and I'm engaged in the story, what happens next, but then I have to back up because there's all of these components that you're putting together so masterfully. And so in the very preface, you say, we desperately need a revolution in caring. And I want to know, I've got one part of that picture, but in light of the healthcare system more broadly and what you were just talking about, the collaborations and so on, what is this revolution you're calling for? Victoria, share it.
You know what? I mean, honestly, as I say, curing disease is not for wimps. You have to engage people. You have to make it more important than it's just in their world. And it's really about having a conversation and bringing people together. I mean, I really do think it's in that, what Gloria spoke to, that connectivity, that pure, organic, authentic intention, whether it was through the power of love or really just wanting to do right by a lot of people, is getting a lot of really smart people in the room that genuinely care. And I don't mean that in a Pollyannish way. I mean it in the way that when I look out at the people that come to my conferences, I bring together over 30 countries, and I bring everybody together. And in that room, everybody's speaking the same language. When I look out at, we do patient day where I bring, every year we've brought patients in, we pay for everything, we take care of everything. And I look out at that room and I'm always thinking, everyone in this room, black, brown, you name it, the color of skin, the age, everybody's there to really support, help, learn. And it's kind of finding that thread and just building on that. I mean, that's really what I've done. And I've just seen magic happens when you do that. And problem solving. So there's so many issues that came up along the way. For example, in a rare disease, which has turned out, by the way, it's not as rare as they were saying when thought there might have been 10,000 people worldwide. There's hundreds of thousands of people. It's just because, unfortunately, it's misdiagnosed a lot with MS, as a lot of autoimmune diseases can be. And, once you start seeing all these people working together, and the issue came up is to do all the research, you're going to need blood, you need serum, you need tissue samples. I had to think, okay, so how am I going to get to that next place? I'm going to build a biorepository. Now you can imagine, once again, coming back from my background in the beauty world, I had built a beauty empire and had lots of color cosmetics in inventory, but I certainly didn't have samples of blood and serum. So early on, I even ran a program called Blush for Blood. It was, you get very creative on how you're going to do, but I knew whatever came my way was going to be a challenge. And I think through, who are the people we need to get in the room to help us to get to the next place? Because ultimately, I'm very singularly focused. And I think this is where my childhood, as being a survivor, I didn't realize whatever pain I went through in things that I encountered growing up, which there were many, as we've all shared in our lives, different things. It really prepared me to speak and rise to the moment and think through and know that no matter what was going to keep coming at me, I was just going to take it as it comes and figure the way out. And I just think that's what people need to do, and they need to just have more people in the conversation and hold hands.
Yeah, well, there's a genius to what you do, because there's it's not, as I read it anyways, just about bringing the people into the room. You're really about transparency. You're really about having the difficult conversations in the room. This is not about the old boys backroom way, and then you come in and, you know, the decision's kind of done. There's a real process there that you've been overseeing. So one of the things I wanted to, this revolution that you're calling for, I was thinking about how, you know, our former President Obama the other day was talking about how both the COVID-19 pandemic and the killing of George Floyd have thrown open very widely windows that show us a long history of disparate treatment in health in various things. And so I was sort of wondering, when you're thinking about, because we know that with the pandemic, different communities are affected differently, healthcare is not as available. How would you move your blueprint there? Like, I'm sure you're seeing things and going, ah.
Yeah, I'm definitely, and you know, obviously it really requires leadership and setting a tone from the top down. I mean, I was always I was fortunate in the sense that obviously we were able to finance a lot of things. So I could say, this is how we're going to do it. Every institution has to work with a partner, another institution, and everything has to be, it has to be totally transparent. So we have to know what's working, but also what's not working. Everything was tranched, meaning they would have to have hit a milestone before there was funding to go to the next place. And if there were people that were not, shall we say, you know, listening to the rules of the road and maybe not sharing or being too protective of their findings, you know, there'd be a little bit of a talking to, and you know, we'd move to the next place. So I think that was really important. And it was also how I found that pharmaceutical companies started to become engaged when they started seeing how I was also marketing. I brought sort of my marketing life of Victoria Jackson Cosmetics and, you know, all the airtime that had been spent on building my brand, how I needed to now put in the spotlight NMO and patients and their struggles and their stories. And even now, Betty, in this drug that will be coming out, it's really important to me, and my work is not done, that there's a therapy. It's that it has to get in the hands of all the people that need it. And insurance has to be able to cover that. And so the work will go on to make sure that it's really, you know, starting from here to there, that ultimately everything that I do has to really be translational. It has to translate from, as they say, you know, bench to bedside, where people are now going to have this. So you have to really follow that whole line. And I think sometimes people are so siloed, they're so protective, they just stay in their area, they stay in their comfort zones. You know, I just throw all that out the window, and I think differently, and I bring the people together that are willing to come along on the ride, and I say, join with me, we're gonna do it. At times you're gonna feel like, where are we going? But it's taking a leap. It's a leap of faith, but it's also with a really healthy measure of knowing where we're going. And I don't know that, unfortunately, and again, I'm not gonna say negative things about our president. I'm sure there's people on the call that all have different views. But for me, it has to be about leadership. And I'm not seeing the leadership that I would like to see, and setting the tones that we need in this country to move us to the next place. Everything is stopping a conversation at the top. It's not encouraging, and the lack of empathy. You know, empathy is not to be underrated. Empathy is such a guiding light in so many ways, and so many people from so many countries in my conferences have come up to me and said, they just had empathy. They could feel it. They wanted to be a part of something. And, you know, that's contagious. And that's what we need. And I'm hoping that's what we're really starting to see and feel in this shift.
Yeah, I hope so too. You know, for everything as basic as testing and tracking, and trying to contribute to the global, patterning and documenting of that. So I have a question for you, and then we're going to, I'll ask this question and then we'll give a heads up to move to audience questions. But one thing really popped out at me because, you know, women's studies and so on. But it was in your book that more women have NMO, and that, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Dr. Chitnis, is that correct? One of your videos also says that women tend to predominate in autoimmune diseases.
Yes.
And so this of course popped out at me with some of the other recent books that are being published, everything from, you know, aspirin studies, the sex of the mice when they're being tested, persistently still a problem, and even seatbelts that were not normed on women's bodies. So I was just wondering if you wanted to shed a little bit of light on that, because it's popped up in a couple of places with your work.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely autoimmune disease, much more affects women. Why is that? I think there's a lot of unanswered questions there. Is it hormonal? For example, in NMO, after, a lot of women have gone ahead and given birth, and then 3 months after, they've had some very debilitating relapses. So, you know, why is that? There's a lot of things we still don't know. We don't know what triggers attacks. We don't know why is it all of a sudden in a situation, whether it's my daughter in an autoimmune disease, where all of a sudden one day her body is seeing something that she's always had. We all have, in her case, it's aquaporin 4, something that we all have, didn't recognize it as self, and it was an enemy and started to attack. So why are we having more autoimmune diseases these days? Is it diet related? Is it the environment? I can tell you I'm doing a lot of work right now. I'm working with Verily, which is the V in the alphabet of Google, their life sciences, on biomarkers to start shedding some light on more of why is it that women are more affected by these autoimmune diseases? Why are we having more autoimmune diseases lately? And I think I think that's going to start shedding more and more light on it. But it's even when, and I, going back to when I bring patients and I look out in the audience, I'll see very small children, I'll see babies, I'll see very young, very old, but predominantly women. And I do think autoimmune disease, you know, when you think about it, cancer, when you're treating cancer, you run the risk of infection. Infection can also start creating this imbalance in your immune health. You start having now more of you're more predisposed to autoimmune disease. So it's really finding that perfect balance in our health that ultimately is where we want to get to that place. And I think in medicine and where we are now, you're going to see a lot more moving in that direction with this whole precision medicine, where you're going to be, it's much more, you know, monoclonal antibodies, which you're hearing more about. You'll hear more about that as they go forward in COVID and vaccines, but things that are more strategic and specifically targeted.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Well, we really do need to bring our audience in. So I'm going to look at the participant list and see if there are any hands up. While I'm looking at that, I know we had some questions submitted earlier, and one of them was about the antibody test that can distinguish NMO from MS. And do you think the studies done on antibodies for NMO can be helpful for the antibody research currently being conducted with COVID-19 patients?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I'll always tell you when I know, but I know it's something with Dr. Michael Yeaman, who helped me in the writing of this book, especially. He's the head of infectious disease and molecular medicine at UCLA. We're looking at that now. We worked very closely with the Mayo Clinic in creating that assay for NMO, which I should say at the time, even when I went to the doctor at UCLA with Ali in the very early days, he had never even checked the box for that test before. So it was actually sort of a miracle that he had checked it. And I remember when he checked it saying, "What is this NMO?" And he said, "Oh, don't worry, she's not going to have that. That would be a very bad thing." And of course, that's what it came back. But to answer your question, I would like to follow up and get back to you on that answer.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any hands up yet, so I'll go with the second one. Tell us a little bit more. This person is interested in about the whole, and I just thought this was sheer genius, having done elder care myself, having the nurse go out to collect the blood samples. So the question is, did she, how do you store that sort of stuff? How do you move those samples around? Get us into the nitty gritty of that, Victoria.
It was crazy again, in my whole, different way, creative thinking of blush for blood. And we, one of the nurses that, one of the physicians that my daughter was seeing, she was starting to get involved, and he also had other patients. And I said, what about if we need to collect, again, thinking outside the box, nobody had done this. I said, why not put, her name was Martha out on the road to go collect samples, and she would fly to places, she would drive to places, and she would collect the samples. She would land and maybe go to the 7-Eleven and fill up an ice chest. I mean, it was definitely very, you just kind of guerrilla in the trenches. We're gonna figure out how to get what we need. She had a machine in her car that would spin the blood down. So, so that's the kind of things that we did.
Okay. I think we just had some people who came off of mute. So just a reminder.
Can't hear you, Betty.
Yeah, thank you, Judy. I realized that I just muted myself too. There were some people that we could hear who came off mute, and I'll be happy to take you individually off mute if we've got this set up well. Jennifer Morris.
Can you hear me okay now? I just wanted to be sure. Okay, good.
So my question is just a quick, give us an update on Allie and how she's doing. Last we knew in the book, she was going to law school. So
thank you for asking. She's doing well. We'd actually gone through 6 years without any attacks. And again, that you don't know why all of a sudden she recently had an attack, and she had one, and then she had, they do come in clusters. So I have to say it was obviously a tough moment. Again, it was sort of to revisit that time. And Allie has always said, "Mom, you have NMO more than I do. I'll be fine." And so her spirit and her positivity is just, what keeps me going, and so many of the people and the patients I talk to. But she did recently, but she's okay now. She is in law school and business school. She is just, one day you'll be talking about her at the hall for sure. She has a whole story that's all her own, and how she navigates it is extraordinary. And I love her dearly. So thank you for asking, though, Jennifer. Appreciate that.
Anything to follow up on that, Jennifer? Or?
No.
Okay. Don't be shy. When I asked Victoria, are there any no-go areas for questions, she's like completely open. So any other questions? Well, I have one more. Curious about your thinking on anti-vaxxers.
Well,
who don't want state mandates for school-age children to be vaccinated to attend school. Now they must and do homeschool in New York State. How do individual medical health care protocols apply?
I mean, you know, if Michael were on the phone, and I know because he's very involved in the world of vaccines, and he even wrote to me and he wrote, vaccines are arguably the most effective and important medical interventions of all time. Clearly revealed in the current epidemic, vaccines to prevent or minimize life-threatening infections are of the utmost important. You know, it's tough because I know a lot of people look at things from a lot of different ways, and ultimately people have to make decisions that work for them and for their families. So I think you have to look at each vaccine differently and make your own judgment. I really do think that probably ultimately I'd like to see certain vaccines where maybe some blood work is done before to see if you have certain ANAs, or maybe you're not a candidate for a vaccine, whether it's live or not. I think there's a lot of things that have to go into that decision and that discussion. And my biggest thinking on it, honestly, Betty, is that everybody just needs to become informed. They need to do the research. They need to go beyond just listening to what the doctors say. I mean, early on, the doctors, even with Allie, said, you know, just if I were you, I'd just go home, go in denial, and just enjoy the rest of the 4 years that you have with her. And that obviously wasn't an option. And that's you know, that's not even how I think. So I just think on that, everybody needs to just become informed and make a decision for themselves and their family.
Okay, we have a question from Judy Pfeiffer.
Sure.
Wonderful talk. I know many families where there is a tendency for autoimmune diseases to run through the family. And I'm just wondering if your foundation or your researchers are working on exactly why that is and what can be done. It doesn't even have to be the same autoimmune disease. It could be a different one from person to person in the family.
Yeah, that's a good question, Judith, and I agree. And I have some family members that have autoimmune disease in the world of Sjogren's. And so, you know, and again, it's like, you know, why is that? We're going to find that there's genetic predispositions to that. But what are some of these triggers? So I do think that more and more you're going to see it in families. And, you know, just as we have with cancer, I think the conversation around, and I encourage everybody, if you haven't, on we have an app called NMO Resources. There's a video, it's an animated video called the NMO Story, and you can hear about some of these statistics of autoimmune disease around the world and its frequency, and as it relates to families as well. But absolutely, it's something that you'll see running in families. The chances of a sibling having NMO, in the case with Allie, I have 3 children, so I also have 2 boys, and they were tested early on, and they did not.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good, but
yeah.
Thank you, Judy. Betsy Fantone.
Hi, Victoria.
Hey.
I love the story about your friends getting together and putting the qualities they thought would help you get through your cancer situation into the rose quartz stone.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, do you still have it? Is it there with you? Do you travel with it? I'd keep it under my pillow when I slept every night.
You bet I do. And what was amazing about that is when all of a sudden, it's kind of the story of, I knew that there was probably something going on, and my doctor, when he was going to, you know, tell me, you know, I had a pap smear that wasn't looking quite right, and when he was telling me, I kept saying, "Oh, is there something going on?" He goes, "Oh, Victoria, you're always thinking the worst. I read your book. You're thinking you're in that, you know, percentage of, and when he told me, it was just, I thought, wow, this is, again, having to figure out how to navigate. But I honestly so don't think about that. I just said, I'm going to move on. And my friend said, okay, we're going to have this gathering. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'll do the surgery I need to do, but I'm on a mission, you know? So I had such a bigger calling that to me, it was like, let's just get rid of that, deal with whatever, but I've got this calling. So when they all got together and they passed around the stone and it was so poignant because Allie was sitting right next to me and everybody had put something in the stone, and Allie got the stone in her hand, and she was right before I was going to, and she said, Mom, you put everybody else in a stone, but I'm you in the stone. And it was one of those things I was just like, oh, it was so killer. And she put me in the stone and handed me the stone. And the next day I had my surgery and I'm fine. So, but it's just that resiliency that we all have to have. I mean, we have to, and where we are in the country right now, it's like, we just gotta, people are marching through it, walking through it. You called me the fire walker. It's just, you gotta just keep moving forward, and you have to find the way, because the way is there.
Yes, thank you.
But thank you for asking, and I do have it. It's with me always.
I'm just looking to see if we have any other questions, and I'll go back to the list. And I wondered about this too. In the book, you also talk about how you had to learn the language of disease. And we have a question from someone who's sort of like, how in the world did you ever get the first people in the room with you?
You know, you start talking to your friends, who then say, for example, Larry Steinman, who is a professor at Stanford, and I had friends that said, you know, I know this gentleman, he's a professor at Stanford, he's working in the world of MS. Turns out he's quite a leader in the world of MS and had been also on the forefront of creating a therapy. And I started to talk to him, and when he saw the purity of heart, that we were not looking to own anything, we're literally appealing to help us with our daughter, he came on board and said, I will be an advisor. And then once you start having that first person, and now they're talking to somebody else saying, I think that it would be great to have this expert and that expert, you start just very, you know, day by day, making the calls, meeting the people, trying to engage them, working again through their humanity and their soul, and try getting the science, and you just start building it layer by layer, and people taking that leap of faith and seeing that I was going to be in the position of leadership where I was going to require transparency and try to really rewrite and create a new blueprint, not one that they had followed before or thought they were blazing new trails that led to dead ends, but truly opening up new pathways. And I was very, very fortunate to have that early on and cultivate it and have those people, you know, come on board.
Yeah, that part always makes me think about feminist methodologies from the ground up. Let the bumps and the obstacles be there in the room, but from the ground up. And it's so moving to hear how you built those parts. Jennifer has her hand up.
Thank you. So it seems to me that we need someone like you, Victoria, to be getting people into a room right now. Like, what can we do about COVID? There's got to be a lot of smart people. There are a lot of different groups working on different aspects, but it's like no one's pulling them together.
Yes, I
Feels
agree.
like.
I so think about that, and I'm always thinking, oh, I need to be in that room. Oh, I need
Yes.
to be in that call.
Yes.
And even now, I've put together for the foundation, we do a COVID update call for the community every 2 weeks. I'm always looking at what's happening out there, that how can I be part of this conversation of how can my book find its way into the right hands. You know, it's really making a little bit noise again for people to go, hey, here's a way, here's what I've done. You know, this really does work. So I'm in it, Jennifer. I'm not going away. So I agree. I want to be in that conversation with COVID. I want to be in that conversation right now with George Floyd. I want to be in all those conversations because that is where my heart is. That is where, bringing it back to where we started, that is where my soul is. And I'm just hoping wherever I can to bring along as many people as I can.
Thank you.
Yes, we want to see you there because you knit together, you know, you don't operate by divisiveness, you operate by building bridges. And few people have that skill, especially when you have, I can only imagine, many people with their own ideas in the room.
Yes, yes. And as you said, learning the language. I learned that in business. And I think as women, when we get to that place of we're not afraid to ask what we think is that dumb question or we're going to look foolish, all of that went out the window for me. It was like, hey, I'm going to ask anything. What I don't know, I don't know. Please educate me, help me. And I did have to learn an entirely new language. I did not graduate high school. I didn't go to college. I was a victim of, some of you know that reading my earlier book, The Pillowcase Rapist, when I was younger. And I did not finish high school. I was in the 12th grade and didn't finish, and never had the opportunity to go on to college. So everything for me really has been self-taught. And that's why I know there was, and I've always dealt with low self-esteem. There was always that part of me going, hey, if I could do this, you can do this. And I may not have all the answers, but let's go. And that's how I operate.
I love the spirit, and it makes me think so much of all those inductees, close to 300 now, that kind of spirit that's, but also the willingness to look at something and look deeply at it.
Right.
And learning the language of it. And then you have a special skill, I'm guessing by the book and when I've talked with you, it's not just that you've learned how to listen, you've learned how to hear. And those are two different things.
Right.
And especially when you translate the medical model into, hey, you know, this NMO is an antibody having an identity crisis. And that just flashed for me. I was like, that's a wonderful way to think about our inner bodies that seems so invisible to us and that we can't tap into. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Think about you and I think about Allie. And now I'm going to bring us around to some closure on this.
Okay.
Well, you know, back in the day, Proust had this set of questions if you wanted to get to know somebody, but we need a feminist set of those questions to wrap this up. So we're going to play a little bit, whatever comes to mind. Are you ready? Yep. What brings you joy in daily life?
My children. I'm a mom. I'm a mom at heart. My children do. That's it. My children. And nature. I love being in nature. I love being in nature. I love meditation.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Me too. How do you practice self-care?
Nature and meditation. I go for walks and I meditate. And I've even brought in, on my patient days, I've brought in things that, you know, I've been exposed to, and I expose others to it to say, hey, look, if this is helpful to you to calm your mind, deal with your pain, that's what I do. I work to find my own, you know, walk my own spiritual path and find my own meditation. And I love being in nature.
Beautiful. What's your rallying cry? Or what would you feel like shouting in those moments?
Oh man, it's like, stop the insanity. It's just stop the insanity. I can't take it.
When do you feel most creative?
You know, that is, I'm always feeling creative. It's just, I'm always feeling creative.
You know, I want you to come out with the makeup line for Zoom meetings.
That's an easy one too. It's called the no makeup.
Yeah.
And I did that for many, many years.
I do know, yes. What inspires you?
Oh gosh, I mean, just different people every day inspire me. You know, I never really grew up having a mentor or looking to any one person. Well, I would say Gloria is probably the closest in my heart now, but it's, you know, it's just the next book you're going to read, or the next sentence you hear, or the next stranger you talk to. It's always those little bits that you don't know where they're coming from. That's always kind of my next jumping off point, or things that stimulate the next road maybe, or where I'm already walking, it's enhancing that. That's just, I'm open to all of it.
What do you dance to?
Gosh, I dance to it, just anything with the beat. When I need to really just quiet my mind, I do like anybody else. I have to just turn up the volume a little bit. And so I would put a little plug for my son, who is a musician and was on the road very early on as a singer-songwriter with One Direction, and he composes all his own music. So in my little mom plug, I dance to his music.
Very nice. What song do you like to sing, in the car or in the shower?
Oh, I'd say, you know, Here Comes the Sun, George Harrison, Here Comes the Sun. I love that. I mean, you can't not.
Can you give us a line? You will give us a little line?
Oh, we all know it, you know, Here Comes the Sun. I mean, and I'm fortunate because Olivia Harrison is a dear friend of mine. So I'm just not going to botch George Harrison's song, but it's Here Comes the Song is just, it's just like, it's a new day. It's all going to be okay.
Yeah. All right, the last one.
Yep.
What's your favorite feminist sisterhood moment?
Gosh, I would say, again, being with some of my closest friends, which are they are my sisterhood. I'm very fortunate. I have a beautiful avocado ranch and farm up here in Santa Barbara, and we've all sat around I have a teepee, and we've all sat in there and just, you know, talked from our soul, who we are, celebrating Gloria's 85th birthday up at my ranch with her friends and mine joined. Those are the incredible moments. And the young people that I meet, they're all my sisters. And I just love whenever I can just share, when I can get out of my head and just be with them and listen, which I heard talking about what you said earlier, Tom Hanks said something called wait, which is like, why am I talking? And I think a lot about the wait and why am I talking? And I just need to listen.
Lovely. So in the end then, what's the next chapter?
Gosh, you know, I think, Betty, with all that's going on in the world, and for me, the Stop the Insanity, I think about politics. I think about where can I make a difference? You know, that there is the next chapter for me. You know, I've kind of gone from mascara to medicine, and I'm, you know, on the sidelines. You'll see me popping around a little bit more now with Ellen's skincare line, and as the developer and creator of that. But the next chapter for me really will be more, I think, just out there spreading the word about working together in, as I said, COVID, the George Floyd, this shift that's happening. I want to be a part of it. I want to be I want to be anywhere, whether it's the forefront, in the middle. I want to be there and talking and sharing. So I just know for me, once it starts bubbling up, then I'll see where all roads lead. But I can't help but when I'm sitting there watching TV, just going, I want to be in those rooms.
Mm-hmm. So any thoughts on how you would sort of tackle this divisiveness, and get I'm thinking about the collaboration on COVID-19, you know, so you got some people collaborating on it, but not all. So is there anything that immediately pops out on
Well, what immediately pops out is I'm very fortunate that Dr. Yeaman is working as well with Dr. Fauci. So I'm seeing that that my line in connectivity is closer than you might think. I just don't like to talk about things before I'm able to do something or make an imprint. I wrote a piece, an op-ed piece talking about the journey and how I think this blueprint could be meaningful, and I'd like to see that get out there. So, you know, I'm starting all of my discussions and ways in to see how I can do that and be most effective.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't think we have any other questions, and it's time for us to bring this to a close. So I want to thank you deeply, with deep gratitude. I learned so much from your work, and I appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to sharing that in the classroom as well. I think higher education could learn a lot from you too. So if we can just airlift you in, that'd be great.
Well, I love doing that.
Yeah. And I'd also like to especially thank you as our inductee and for being brave and bold and courageous in your work, but also in this inaugural book club event. We invite all of you in the audience to visit the National Women's Hall of Fame website. And I believe that by tomorrow, we will have a list of resources available for you to follow up for if you're interested more in NMO. And if you're also interested in the kinds of, I mean, there's the videos, the resources for thinking about blueprints, building patient connections, and so on and so forth. There's just a wealth of material there. And it'll be wonderful to see that up on the Hall website. You may want to find a way to pitch into the work that Victoria is doing and or donate. All those resources will be there for you to explore. We also invite you to reacquaint yourself with the National Women's Hall of website. There's lots of exciting things happening. We're working with designers for our new exhibit. And yes, we'd love you to click on that donate to the hall button while you're clicking around on the web anyway. And hope that you will join us and stay tuned for the next book club event. Victoria.
Thank you.
So lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who joined us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good job. Good job.
Natalie, I want to thank you for our hall coordinator for putting this program together. We're really grateful. Thank you. Do we have anybody left? You're on mute. Mute. You're on mute.
I am on mute. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting now, but thank you all. It was a wonderful time. We will hopefully see you at our next book club event.
Yay. Thanks, Natalie.
Bye.